I completed 100 Tier 2 contracts, all in an effort to find the exact probability of every acquisition. And what I found was pretty interesting. This took me 9 full games of playing just Tier 2 contracts to get this all filled out. Here is how all of these contracts are spread out between all of the different contract types. You can see I personally enjoy having a lot of HVT and cargo delivery contracts, and really there wasn't a lot of escort contracts to go around, and same with Outlast contracts. That took me a while to really find in the map itself. They don't seem to spawn all that often. Now, looking at the bigger spreadsheet here, you can see we have all of the contracts I did in order. You can see the time I picked up the contract, the time I finished the contract, the total time it took to complete the contract, and all of the rewards in order that came with completing that contract. So starting off broad here, we did a total of 100 contracts, and we got a total of 208 rewards. This is nearly almost perfectly 2 rewards per contract. And right away, you could tell the difference between this and the Tier 1 results, because in Tier 1, you only got 1.3 rewards per contract. So this is definitely a step up. And this is really interesting to think about, because when going and doing Tier 2 and Tier 3 contracts in our brain, of course, you want the rewards to be better, but part of what makes them better is that you get more things, more acquisitions. And this is definitely something we're going to be noticing once we get into the Tier 3 and Dark Ether rewards too. And this is how those 208 rewards were dispersed. You can see we got 58 perk cans, 29 ammo mods, 12 Casimirs, 3 wonder weapons, 19 uncommon tools, 14 rare tools, 3 epic tools, 1 legendary, 10 pack-a-punch crystals, that's important, we'll get back to that, 1 pack 2, 1 pack 3 crystal, 7 rare kill streaks, 4 epic kill streaks, 11 self-revives. Now this is interesting. The self-revive is actually a guaranteed drop on your first contract that you complete if you are playing solo, so that is going to skew our results here just a little bit. Then of course, 6 medium rucksacks, 5 large rucksacks, 10 2-plate vests, and 1 3-plate vest, and a total of 13 schematics. That number I think is actually higher than it should be, because as I was doing one of my last games ever, I got so lucky with 3, count them 3, back-to-back-to-back schematics. We're gonna call that YouTuber luck. And because we did 100 contracts, turning all of these into percentages is really easy. You just add a percentage sign to the back of it. So think about this number as, if you're going to do a contract, this percentage is exactly the probability you're going to get whatever item. You have a 14% chance to get a blue tool. You have a 29% chance to get an ammo mod. You have a 58% chance to get a perk can. And the thing that jumps out to me is we have a 13% chance of getting schematics. This is incredibly cool, because I did get lucky and get those 3 back-to-back-to-back schematics, but as I was doing this test and inputting all of these numbers, that schematic percentage was approaching 10%. And I guarantee you, if I played more games, I think the schematics would get closer and closer to 10% per contract. The reason I believe that is because that is the exact percentage we found when doing the threat level 1 contracts. We did 50 Tier 1 contracts, and of those 50 contracts, we got 5 schematics, meaning that was also a 10% chance per contract. Now, you might not think in terms of a percent per contract. You might want to look at this data set in terms of percent per reward. So this graph shows you, of all of the rewards that you have, what percentage of those rewards is going to be whatever item. So you can see here, a third of these items are going to be perk cans, 14% of them are going to be ammo mods, 10% of them uncommon tools. And you might be thinking, donuts, legendary tools, pack 2 crystals, pack 3 crystals, 3-plate vests, those have a 0% chance. Well, actually the graphing website that I used for this didn't have like half percents or decimal places, but I imagine anything like the legendary tool or pack 2 or pack 3 crystal would have a less than 1% chance of being rewarded to you. Even though it's 100 contracts that we completed, there still is the chance, and in all honesty, it's probably very likely that some of these items, like the legendary ether tool, like the pack-a-punch 3 crystal, have less than a 1% chance of actually being awarded to you. Now, if you're more of a pie chart, or should I say donut chart type of person, I have this for you. Now, it's a little bit more cluttered, because there's a lot more items that you have rewarded to you in Tier 2, which is definitely really interesting and definitely a perk of doing more contracts in Tier 2, but yeah, it's kind of hard to read, honestly. Now, you might think, as many of us do, Tier 2 rewards should be better than Tier 1. However, there is one noticeable thing that is actually worse in Tier 2 than it is in Tier 1. That is Pack-a-Punch 1 crystals. When we did our threat level 1 testing, we got 9 Pack-a-Punch 1 crystals. That was with 50 total contracts. And now in our threat level 2 testing, we did 100 contracts, and we only got 10 Pack-a-Punch 1 crystals, only 1 more than the 50 contracts we did in Tier 1. This means that the likelihood of getting a Pack-a-Punch 1 crystal in Tier 2 is nearly half as likely as it is in Tier 1. Now, either I got incredibly lucky in my tier 1 contract testing or incredibly unlucky in my tier 2 contract testing, or that's the actual percentage difference between the threat level 1 and threat level 2 of the Pack-a-Punch 1 crystal. It's definitely a weird design choice to make that crystal less likely, whereas the Pack-a-Punch 2 crystal, as you can see, we only got one Pack-a-Punch 2 crystal in the tier 2 contract. Out of 100, only one crystal? That seems fairly light if you ask me. And the only other item that was less common in tier 2 than it was in tier 1 is the green ether tool. That being said, it was still ever so slightly different. In tier 1, you had a 20% chance of getting a green tool. In tier 2, you have a 19% chance. In terms of your total contract rewards, the green tool in tier 1, you would get about 15% of the time, and in tier 2, you get about 9% of the time. However, that actually makes sense because in tier 2, you want to get better rewards, which means less of those kind of surface level rewards like those green tools, because the blue tool is way more common in tier 2 than it was in tier 1. So you can see the progression of the game pushing you into that higher and better loot, whereas the Pack-a-Punch 1 crystal just becomes less common and doesn't replace it with a Pack 2 crystal at all. Even with the Pack-a-Punch 2 and the incredibly lucky Pack-a-Punch 3 crystal that I got on my last game, I only had a 12% chance of getting all of the Pack-a-Punch crystals in tier 2 versus in tier 1 with only the 9 Pack-a-Punch 1 crystals, I had an 18% chance per contract of getting a Pack-a-Punch crystal. I'm pointing this out because the Pack-a-Punch crystals I have felt ever since launch are incredibly rare. Not just the Pack-a-Punch 2 or Pack-a-Punch 3, but all of them, and this really supports that. Now we've talked about what's less common. What's more common? Well, actually, most things are way more common in tier 2 than they were in tier 1. You get Casimirs, wonder weapons, purple tools. We even got a legendary tool, as you guys saw on camera the other day when doing some tier 2 contracts. But perhaps one of the biggest increases we've seen is in kill streaks and what I will call the persistent upgrades, the rucksacks and plate vests. We got 11 kill streaks, and outside of self-revives, we've got 22 different types of rucksacks and plate vests, as opposed to our tier 1 contract testing where we only got a single medium rucksack. Honestly, I really like the kill streaks being in tier 2. It feels really powerful, but not too powerful. I think it's a good place for them to go. However, with the rucksacks and the 2 plate vests, I feel as though when I'm going into tier 2, I want to at least have a medium rucksack and a 2 plate vest. So I almost feel like those two specifically are a little bit misplaced. I would like to see maybe those decreased in tier 2 and increased in tier 1, and then have the large rucksack and 3 plate vest a little bit more common in tier 2, so that way it gears you up for tier 3. But overall, it's a good place to be. Lots of good rewards here, and honestly, pretty good for a 0 to hero run if you ask me. Now here is a graph of everything in order. Your top 5 most common items in tier 2 will be perk cans, ammo mods, uncommon ether tools, rare ether tools, and just squeezing in at number 5 is schematics. But like I said, I betcha those schematics is a little bit inflated because I got super lucky, so you're probably more likely to get Casimirs, and like I said with the self-revive, it's probably skewed because I play solo a lot, so maybe that 2 plate vest or even the Pack-a-Punch 1 crystals might be more common within that top 5 or top 10 space. That being said, when you look at all of these as a percentage, I got so many perks, so many ammo mods, so many blue and green tools, it was nuts. There were a lot of times where I got multiple perk cans, or just an ammo mod, or just a green tool. Now let's take a look at the raw data. Here it is, this huge spreadsheet. Isn't it beautiful? Oh my goodness, it's great. This has all of the raw information on it, and this will be linked in the description. You can see exactly when the game starts, when the game ends. I put the date, I put the season that it was completed on. I did all of these within season 2.5 or season 2 reloaded. Something I wanted to take a look at were the schematics. So you can see I got the Juggernog schematic, I got PhD next, then I got back-to-back Ethereum schematics, then I got PhD again, then I got the raw Ethereum again, then I got Shatterblast, Juggernog again, and then for my back-to-back-to-back, I got Deadwire, PhD, and the raw crystal. And the last schematic I got was another Deadwire. Now, unlike our tier 1 schematics, we actually got every single tier 2 schematic that you can in these 100 games. 100 contracts, I mean. But now let's have a little bit of fun. Let's sort these contracts by how quickly I completed them. As you can see, the HVT contracts are definitely still the fastest you can do. The fastest contract I ever did was a 42-second HVT contract. And as we scroll down here, you can see all of the different rewards. You can see all the different things that we get. It doesn't look like there's any sort of relationship between how quickly you complete a contract and the reward that you get. As we start moving down, you can see we've got cargo deliveries are still pretty fast. We've got spore controls getting in here that could be really fast. You can actually see that ether extractors are a good fast-ish contract comparable to raid weapon stashes and outlast contracts. And of course, the slowest of the slow has to be the defend ground station contracts and the escort contracts, which is a shame because I love my escort contracts. Now you might be looking at the end of this going, donuts, look at the escort contracts. You got 3 schematics and a wonder weapon. Yeah, that's true. But if you scroll right back up, we've got these really fast HVT contracts with also wonder weapons, gold tools, and schematics too. So really, I don't see any obvious signs that there's any sort of relationship between the speed and the goodness of the reward here. And just to be sure, here is all of the rewards sorted by the first reward that you get, so you can kind of see if there's any sort of correlation here. Again, doesn't really look like it. You can see all those perk cans, man. We got so many perk cans. Yeah, so again, this will all be in the description if you really want to dive into this and really see what this is like, but I didn't see anything stand out to me here. And just for transparency, here is all of the contracts organized here, so you can kind of take a look at if you organize it by contracts. Hey, is there any sort of relationship between the rewards and the contracts? Again, I don't see anything, but it'll be in the description for you guys. So many hours went into playing all these games, writing down the information, going through the footage, seeing all these times and graphing them and doing all this stuff. It was incredibly fun. And if you have any suggestions of what I could do better, please write them in the comment section below. Next up, I will be doing the threat level 3 contracts, and I will be doing 100 of them as well. But with how many teams are roaming tier 3 now, it might be a little bit more difficult. Now, if you're looking for something similar to this, I already did this exact same process for threat level 1. You might be thinking to yourself, donuts, isn't it just worse rewards than here? Well, you might actually be surprised. Go ahead and see for yourself by clicking this video right here. And as always, stay beautiful.